Space nerds, how you doing? Welcome in. It is 2026, Alpha 4.5 is out, and Star Citizen's not performing the best. We have some not so happy citizens about the performance levels of 4.5, and there's a reason that Star Citizen has felt like it's regressed a little bit at the end of the year of playability. I'd like to go over that with you. I'm going to talk about what happened in 4.5, why we're seeing some level of instability creep back in, when that might disappear, and kind of just what's going to happen in Star Citizen going forward, because this makes people a little confused. Is it playable or not? I feel like that answer changes by the minute. Let's start. So this is Allie Brown. This is 2017. Allie Brown was actually explaining how they would be incorporating things like Vulcan and multi-threading and changes to the game engine to eventually make it run better and more optimized. Listen in.
And then when we've done the render one, when we've finished that off, that's what's going to enable us to really take full advantage of something like Vulcan or these new APIs that really let us, on the graphic side, like spread out the work across as many cores as possible. And that's where we're really going to get some real performance wins. Okay.
Okay. So obviously, like this has been in the planning for a while. The switch over to Vulcan is not something that came out of nowhere. It has been in the works. Here is actually another video of Allie talking about not just what we're seeing now, but this was the whole plan for the graphics engine of Star Citizen, the Vulcan API, where the game was headed in terms of making the game actually run well. This is a pretty solid video too. It's still relevant. Talks a lot about how multi-threading can improve CPU performance. It brings in a lot of the different engineers who are in this crunchy part of the development to talk about this. The rendering engine, even just down to like the languages that are being used at the lowest levels to try and write this game better and make it run better. So at the end of this video, he gave milestones for how this progress would work starting from 2021, which we've already been progressing through.
After this, that's where we'll start seeing the public milestones, and the first of that will be 100% usage of Gen 12 and none of the hybrid approach.
So Gen 12, just for everybody who's bumping in, Gen 12 is just the name that they came up with for their new renderer. The important bit of Gen 12 is that it enables the Vulcan API. The Vulcan API allows for cross-platform. It allows for more customizable performance settings. It allows for... It basically just like gives them more wiggle room to work with what they have. And it can go much deeper than that. I'm not the person to ask about that. If you want, go talk to somebody over there. Because I'm sure. Over there on the side of the screen. Point being, this was very important for making sure the game could actually run. And we've seen the game improve over the last couple of years as this has been happening. I mean, oh boy, we were getting 20 to 30 frames per second on average, probably a few years ago, five years ago maybe, around when OCS was coming in, I guess. But over the years, it has crept up to the point where now people are seeing pretty regular 60 frames on mid-range computers. Still not good enough, but a lot of that is due to this.
100% usage of Gen 12 and none of the hybrid approach. This will still be at DirectX 11, our current graphics API at this point. And then our second milestone will be the Vulcan API release. That will be optional at first and then mandatory after we've removed all the bugs.
So 4.5 is important because we just reached that point where Vulcan is the default for everybody who's running the game. We're no longer on DirectX 11, which is a big change for the way the game's been running.
And then a final milestone will be when we have performed the optimizations for multi-threaded. So that will only happen once the Vulcan is in place and we can finally look at the performance on the final graphics API and optimize all the remaining code.
So that's what I believe is happening now, as they've forced everyone onto Vulcan. So now they can stop developing for both Vulcan and DirectX 11, and that allows for maybe more simplified engine development. Maybe it's faster, maybe it's more smooth. I don't really know. I'm hoping that we hear from Allie sometime soon, or somebody else from the team, just to know what direction it's headed in after this. Now, keep all this stuff in mind, because we're going to take a little turn. The letter from the chairman last year was a chance for the team to come out and say, hey, we released server meshing, which was a big goal for a long time. Now, we want to focus on playability. And everybody's like, yeah, playability. Sweet. Love playing the game. They acknowledged that if the current game ran smoothly with fewer obstacles and bugs, it would provide an unparalleled experience and people would be playing it. And it is known So they wanted to perform it. They wanted to focus on performance stability and content in 2025, and the main goals there were to keep feature development out of the live build so that new features coming in wouldn't destabilize the game, to keep people coming back and playing the game, because as has been acknowledged here, people will play. Like, if it runs well, people will play it. It's a pretty novel experience, and really a lot of people get turned away from it just because it's kind of the learning curve is ridiculous and the glitches are crazy. So they recognized that and they wanted to make some progress on that in 2025. Now, I'll say they didn't go all the way, but they definitely improved it. And I think that showed in the funding. You can see that every single month was the best month ever for them, except for December, with a little caveat. They also did a bunch of ship sales. And that muddies the water a little bit, because you could say, well, if they weren't doing ship sales, these months wouldn't have been as good. But every month had an update. They did 11 updates in 2025. Most of those updates had something that was interesting, pulling people back. And I guarantee you, some of the folks who are watching this video are folks who had taken a step away from Star Citizen and came back in 2025 and realized the game runs well enough to actually get some interesting entertainment out of. All that to say, the goal of 2025 was to settle on server meshing and get people playing again. That's it. Just get people playing again, get them into the game, get them interested in spending money. But that couldn't last forever. They needed to eventually get back to making features. The 3.x series of updates was literally just a tech demo of them trying to throw together a space that was entertaining, had enough alpha level features that were kind of functional that we could do something with them, but mostly just to keep things going while they worked on the important bits like server meshing Squadron 42 and building the studios. So it wasn't until around 4.0 that we had this whole setback, and it wasn't much about putting in these experimental features and like random additions anymore. It was about the content. It was about tried and true things. It was about stuff that had already existed. The Hathor locations were from Theaters of War. The ASD locations were from the Good Doctor Arena Commander map. The underground facilities were reworks of the work they had already done with distribution centers in the past. Most of last year's stuff was relatively easy content, considering, how much work it would have taken to make fresh stuff. So now we are here, 4.5 with 4.6 on the horizon. They are releasing features again. Vulcan obviously is a big one that has changed the way that the game functions and is rendered for a lot of people. It's moved people over to a new API. Obviously things are being destabilized, and that's just the way it is. And we were warned about it too. The reason that I'm making this video is because Ali was there a year ago saying that this was going to happen, and it works perfectly in time with this letter from the chairman in showing us that they were willing to shift things around last year to try and reach a goal. And I think I'm not alone in hoping that they feel they've reached that goal in getting plenty of funding last year, hopefully to lead up to the Squadron 42 release, and now they can settle back into maybe focusing more on building the game, adding the features, possibly things breaking if they can't use their tried and true EPTU strategy, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but ultimately just to get back on track with building the game. We'll talk a little bit later about whether that means they can break their funding record from last year, but not only was Vulcan added, engineering was also added. This obviously is a big destabilizing feature because it touches on all of the ships, and some of them don't even get the proper update when it does touch on them. Between Vulcan and engineering being the two major features dropped at the end of the year that didn't really have features coming in, between Ali Brown, the head of all this rendering development and graphics engine work, telling us back in February that when they did do an update, it was going to cause problems, I think it sucks. Probably we kind of expected that it would not be as stable a patch, but I think that they really did themselves a disservice by releasing it in December rather than waiting till January. Now, what Ali was saying last year was, the focus for Star Citizen recently on the code side has been on stability and quality of life improvements to existing features, especially after the rollout of server meshing and the huge impact it's had on the game. As a result, the Star Citizen team haven't been able to take a full new version of the engine in a while, because this would bring potentially instability and slow down the quality of life improvements for players, and also likely prevent regular and timely releases, all of which are critical for continued engagement. That sentence says it all right there. They don't want to slow down the quality of life improvements, and I know there could have been a lot more last year. Elevators were a big one. But there were some things last year that got taken care of that have been very annoying. There are problems that persisted through last year that should have been taken care of that weren't. CIG, where that is at. I do get where he's coming from. It also says that obviously it's going to limit their regular and timely releases. You don't need me to tell you that they did a lot of releases last year. And it, obviously it impacts players. So this shows that their focus last year was on the playability, the players, the quality of life. This year, probably not so much. He continues on by saying, the Squadron 42 team has been road testing Vulcan, along with HDR and multi-threaded rendering, so hopefully most of the kinks are ironed out by the time they reach Star Citizen. Now the doctor's out on that. Are the kinks ironed out? Well, not entirely. I don't know if the problems that we're seeing with 4.5 are because of that engine update, but I don't think it's a coincidence that they couldn't do an engine update since well into 2024. Like more than a year ago, we haven't seen the branch move over in terms of an engine update. Some of you may remember this from Star Citizen Live a couple years ago. Jared got on and told us about how the build and update system works. And I'm not going to go over this whole thing now, but he explains how there's a main dev branch where all the work gets done, and then there's a live branch. And then there are some branches in between where things will get added or fixed or worked on that might make it from the main dev branch into the live branch. It depends on how unstable it is, right? So they're all working on this stuff down here in the game dev branch, right? And the point that Ali is making is that this game dev branch never got brought into the live build, which is what we're using, for over a year. That's what he's saying here when they say that they haven't been able to take a new version of the engine in a while. That means it's just been sitting here. All the stuff we're getting in 4.5 was just sitting here. And maybe they were bug fixing on it, maybe they were working on it, but ultimately it was insulating the live build from more instability. And that's where we are now. Now, I don't think this is good enough. The CTO has been out and about quite publicly, openly, that they have a score of stability that each patch takes, and it needs to hit a certain level before it goes live, because as we pointed out, the most important thing at this point is for them to have a playable game and to keep putting content out for it. I think a patch like 4.5 is good. It probably doesn't cause too much of a problem. A few weeks until they can patch it up. 4.6, 4.5.1, whatever it is that comes out will probably help. But multiple patches like this in a row are going to start to degrade people's confidence that this is a playable game again. While I realize they need to start adding these features, they need to get back to this experimental form of development that they had back in the 3.x cycle. They really need to use the ePTU. They tried it with engineering. They got it to the point where it wasn't breaking the game, and then they put it in the PTU, probably because they needed more people to test it. But I do think that they will have to use the ePTU better with these other features like crafting or really any of the other things that might be coming in this year than they did with engineering. We need to keep the game pretty stable on live and keep a separate ePTU experimental branch going so that people can test the bugs out of this stuff. Either way, this one went longer than I was planning on it going. I just wanted to deliver to you kind of why 4.5 is the way it is, some context into how Star Citizen gets its updates, and some insight into whether this will keep happening or not. I really don't think that we're suddenly back to the old ways of the 3.x updates or 3.18 or 4.0 or anything like that. I think they're still focused on playability, but they really have to toe the line now between adding these features and getting the game built versus maintaining a game environment which they have now sold players on being playable and available for storylines, for missions, for player interaction. We'll see where it goes. Either way, I hope you got something from this. I'll see you in the next one.